In my defense, I co-constructed that title with Dr. Wallace, so she made it as long as it was. Good morning. So I'll start off by just saying one simple statement, that good education predicts good health. I'll say it again. Good education predicts good health. And this is not just a statement I'm making because it sounds good, but a lot of research has told us that if you look at school completion rates, they completely, directly correlate to the health and wellness of a population. Good education predicts good health. So with that being said, here's my title: Contemporary Youth, Hip Hop, and Urban Science Education, the Role of Multimedia Technology in Disseminating the Science Needed for Community Empowerment to Reduce Health Disparities. And as I was looking at that title and sort of soaking it in, and even as I got here and sat here today, I realized that really quickly I was going to remix it. So in the spirit of hip-hop and with a person having a hip-hop sensibility, and I'll talk again about the art of the remix. I think the art of the remix is necessary for the world of education. In hip-hop, you have a track, an artist comes out with a track and puts that track out and garners some energy. They don't want to go through the protocol of redoing and recreating and reframing a whole new idea, and they want to harness upon the energy of the initial song that went out. They just remix it, right? So they take the same themes from the initial track, add to it, maybe put a new artist on it, maybe change a bass line or a beat. So I'm remixing the title, and the new title of our talk is The Loss of Our Rhythm and the Theft of Our Blues, Hip-Hop's Indigo Children, Science and Health Disparity. And I'm coming to that from a lens of a hip-hop pedagogue, but a scholar with a hip-hop sensibility. And one of the arguments I want to make for all of us who are here today is that we cannot conduct the research that we do in this century, in this age, without developing or having a hip-hop sensibility. And a hip-hop sensibility is very different from having sort of an African-American framework or a Latino-Latina framework. It comes from an understanding of the intersections of the frameworks of folks who've been generally marginalized, and how hip-hop serves as the conduit through which their voice is heard. And so if we're talking about culturally responsive work or culturally relevant work, whether in education or in health, it's a necessity for us to begin with a hip-hop sensibility. Then a reality check. Minorities classified as those of any race other than non-Hispanic single-race whites currently constitute about a third of the U.S. population presently. By 2042, minorities are projected to be the numerical majority, making up more than half of the population. By 2050, 54% of the population will be minorities. A large number of those who are classified as minorities, even though they are numerical majorities, will dwell within urban contexts, or what we classify as urban contexts. And so let's get into the talk. And we'll do so by first watching a quick video. And this video is from an artist not well known. His name is Arab. Arab is from Philly. Philly right now is undergoing tremendous change. They are closing a number of schools. The socioeconomic conditions in Philadelphia are probably the most challenging in any area of the United States, with probably the exception of Chicago. And Arab was caught up recently in this really, in a conundrum of sorts. He was an affiliate of a rapper known as Cassidy. And Cassidy was a rapper who gained a lot of visibility in the early 90s, and he was signed to Swiss Beats, and he made millions of dollars. And Arab was this guy who sort of hung out with Cassidy. And as Cassidy's career waned and crashed, Arab's livelihood waned and crashed. And so then Cassidy, it sounds like a soap opera, right? That is hip-hop. And so Cassidy was the lone sort of representative of Philly at the time, and then recently there's an artist called Meek Mill. And so Meek Mill comes out, and now he's the hottest artist out of Philly. And in order for Meek Mill to have sort of a claim to the fame as the person who's from Philly, he has to somehow discount Cassidy. Because what happens with a lot of black males, particularly those who are involved in hip-hop and hip-hop culture, is that we haven't created a structure that allows them to coexist. Or we have a mindset where there has to be one person at each time who's at the top of the heap. And so Cassidy and Meek Mill have been forced not to be able to coexist, and so Arab has to find someone to affiliate with. Either the person who helped him to maintain a survival for many years, or this new guy who will give him the opportunity to have survival for many years to come. And he recently released a track. And here's a video for it. Time, I won't play the entire track, although I wish you could sit here and just listen to the entire track and hear this brother speak about his experiences. But one thing that I think we should notice and identify from this is that he is in this song describing all the conditions of his present state and giving insight to the world on the conditions of his living and giving us even more keen insight into his mental health. Beyond that, he's not just saying this is where I am, but he's laying out the physical conditions of his immediate surroundings that are leading to his present mental state. He's talked about the death of his mother. He's talked about the fact that he has no food in his fridge. He's talked about the fact that he thought he was going to make it as a superstar and he didn't. And the constellation of those challenging experiences converge onto the psyche of this man to the point where he's crying out for help. In the world of education, we talk all the time. In the world of health, we talk all the time about data, evidence. There's a new hyper-focus on this idea of data mining. Go out there and capture the most quantitative data that you can and figure out what the themes that emerge in the lives of these communities. And I would argue that the most clear way that we can get insight into the psyche of a broken health of a population is through the music that pours out of their souls. That data mining for educators and health practitioners actually must involve the deconstruction of the nuanced stories of populations who are crying out for help. That Arab story is not an anomaly. And that if we look at contemporary hip-hop and the themes that emerge, then we have a path through which we can see what it is that we need to do as professionals to address the needs of a population. In fact, I would argue that this information cannot be captured in any other media but through which hip-hop provides. And so I'm going to transition from A-Rap to one of my favorite rappers and one of my recent partners in the project in urban science education, the CHEUSE from Wu-Tang Clan. And this lyric says, "My universe runs like clockwork forever. Words will pull together, sudden change in the weather. The nature and scale of events don't make sense. A storm with no warning, you're drawn in by immense gravity. Gone mad, clouds, dust, and debris. Move at colossal speeds and crush an MC. They move at colossal speeds and crush an MC. Move at colossal speeds and crush an MC." And when he talks about crushing an MC, who's an MC? the master of ceremony, the rapper, the guy who gets on stage and has millions of people at the edge of their seats waiting for any word that comes out of his mouth. But he's talking about this idea of himself existing in a universe that moves with clockwork. And when natural phenomena exist, something as natural as gravity exists, right? It moves at colossal speeds and crushes an MC. That your normalcy crushes me, despite the fact that my universe runs like clockwork. So when I talk about clockwork, I want to talk about what does clockwork mean, or what is clockwork an analogy for? And part of what having a hip-hop sensibility means is having the ability to understand the metaphor and analogies that hip-hop pushes forth. Some of the ideas come forth straight and strict and to the point and clear. Others take a nuanced metaphor and analogy and a sort of understanding of what they make sense of. So this idea of clockwork, what is it about clockwork? I started off the title talking about the loss of our rhythm. What do you know about clockwork? Bills coming like clockwork. And when you say bills coming like clockwork, it means that they're coming in on a regular basis. That clockwork has a rhythm. There's a ticking and tocking. And pay close attention to the idea of a ticking and tocking, because for every tick there must be a tock. But we'll talk about that later, right? That there's a rhythm to the movement of clockwork. The same rhythm that guides our everyday existence. There's a rhythm to the heartbeat. I would argue there's a rhythm to algebra and the balancing of equations. The beauty in our world is based on a rhythm and a balance. In fact, I would argue that when you talk about rhythm and balance, what's another word for rhythm? And I think rhythm in hip-hop is what our version of beauty is, right? When you have that rhythm, there's something beautiful about it. And that beauty, and a synonym for beauty, is fairness, a fair day, a fair sky. That rhythm and beauty are closely interrelated in the psyche of a hip-hop persona, and that there's beauty in our rhythm, and the beauty in our rhythm is a key towards our fairness. Are y'all rocking with me still? So now that we go into this idea of rhythm, I want to talk really quickly about some phenomena in the everyday experiences of a hip-hop generation or a hip-hop population that has a direct correlation to their health that we don't focus upon because we don't have the data. We don't have the capability to be able to fully understand these nuances. And I'll start with the Harlem Fake, or the Harlem Shake, but I call it the Harlem Fake. And this phenomena is one where, you know, there's a song that came out by an artist named Bauer. Bauer comes out, he creates this beat and this rhythm. People see that beat and this rhythm, and they start creating a dance to it, and they call that dance the Harlem Shake, and it becomes a global phenomenon. Anywhere across the globe, people are Harlem shaking, right? And there are people in Harlem who are watching the world shake. When in reality, this dance called the Harlem Shake has deep roots and traditions in our culture. And that for urban youth in Harlem, 3 blocks from here, the Harlem Shake is something that they feel like they invented and they created. This distinct rhythm and dance where one shoulder moves up while the other moves down, and this beautiful, beautiful play of rhythm and balance. And then they go on YouTube one day, and the dance that they created, that they stand in front of a mirror every day and practice, something that is their mode of communication with each other. They turn on YouTube, and they see a bastardized version of it under the name of what they call the Harlem Shake. As educators and health equity advocates, we see this as just another phenomenon that exists, but in reality it just has deep psychological implications on the mindset of somebody who created an artifact to see it become global and not have any piece of it. Think about the fact that every phenomena that we exist every day has a direct correlation to our mental and physical health. That something that's seemingly forgotten as the Harlem Shake has a direct correlation to how we see ourselves in the world. We see the theft of our art and culture, what I argue as neo-indigenous art and culture. And I will expand on the idea of neo-indigenous really quickly. It's the idea that whatever happens in urban America, it's oftentimes a reinterpretation of what happens with indigenous populations. And that we are forever connected. That what identified the indigenous as indigenous was their close ties to their places of origin, their distinct language and talk, and their oppression at the hands of a more dominant other. Those are the things that allowed us to be able to identify the Maori in New Zealand or the Native Americans in the United States. And if you look at those 3 phenomena, they're the same things that we can use to identify the experiences of urban black and brown youth in Harlem and in Chicago. That the theft of art and culture of the indigenous is going on still with the theft of neo-indigenous art and culture, the mockery of those who present a gift, and the connections of microaggressions on health and well-being. That these are deeply connected to who we are. And if I Harlem Shaked for a decade, and we saw A-Rap talk about his opportunities for fame and visibility were lost, this factor, this phenomenon is doing the exact same thing to a whole bevy of people 4 blocks away from us. But it's not considered a health link. It's not considered an education link. And again, it ties to the theft of our rhythm. When I talk about rhythm, I want to expand upon that, because people oftentimes see rhythm as just, just a beat. For example, if I created a beat right now, so it's a beatbox, and I give you a little boom bap, and I put return to boom bap as an homage to KRS-One. For every boom in hip hop, there's a bap. Boom bap is original rap, the rhythm of our language, as created by KRS-One, who's a rapper. But when you talk about the rhythm of education, or the rhythm more generally, it goes beyond just the music. I want you to understand that when we talk about the rhythm of neo-indigenous populations, we're talking about the rhythm of walk, talk, dress, act, the pound. We talk about the George Jefferson strut. Rest in peace, Sherman Hemsley. Like, that was so hip-hop, right? So when he walked across that stage and the hands are going backwards, that's swag. Like, that had a distinct rhythm. And that rhythm is part of who we are. And so we have to understand that if that rhythm is a close part of who we are, then that rhythm has to follow us into spaces that's supposed to provide us with equity. If I have a rhythm in my mode, in my thought, in my Harlem shaking, in my dance, and in my raps on a regular basis, when I walk into the classroom must also create a space for me to be able to express said rhythm. If the space does not exist in the classroom or in the clinic, where I can express the nuances of my life rhythm, then that space creates what Bourdieu calls symbolic violence. And that symbolically violent experience, what it does is it does not allow one to learn. But most importantly, it doesn't allow one to heal. If I'm spending my entire time trying to deconstruct and reconstruct my identity within a social sphere that's supposed to provide me with health, I can never get health. So the argument I'm making here is that for us as practitioners, as we go on in our practice, we must focus on creating new spaces where the rhythm of the experiences of marginalized populations are allowed in spaces that are supposed to be healing them. And if our work does not do that, then we're not moving towards health equity. I will say that again. You can have great intentions, amazing interventions, great ideas, great papers, great articles describing the plight of the marginalized. But if the spaces that we create that are supposed to provide a path towards health and equity do not include the rhythm of our experiences, then we are not meeting our goals. This is why health disparities exist, and I would argue this is why educational inequities exist. This is why achievement gaps exist, because we've done everything but focus on the nuances of the culture of the population. I wanted to talk quickly about the result of the last
27. Okay, so somebody has to do detail.
And that was short. It lasted, what, 30 seconds? And you would say, well, what is he talking about? He's talking about rhythm in the community, rhythm in the Harlem Shake, rhythm in the walk, and rhythm in the talk, and it has implications on education. And this is one of the examples of the implications of the absence of the acceptance of the rhythm. And I think that we should start now, and I'm so glad to sort of spark this center, because we should now start thinking about how we can look at health issues like syndromes as they transfer into educational settings as well. And one of the outcomes of the loss of rhythm, particularly for young women of color, is what I have called the pretty brown girl syndrome. You're looking at me puzzled, so I'll proceed. In a space where a certain population has a rhythm, and they go into a school where that rhythm is not accepted, there are two things you can do. The one thing you can do is completely just disconnect from that space, even though you're physically there, or you learn to acquiesce. Whether or not you acquiesce or you violently respond to the structures of that space, either way, you're spending so much mental power deconstructing self and reconstructing self in that space that you can't learn. Oftentimes when we talk about young women of color in classrooms, particularly in science classrooms where I conduct my research, we have this phenomenon where all the pretty brown girls come sit up front. All the bad black boys sit in the back. The teacher gets in front of the classroom and starts teaching, and the pretty brown girls, you know, they say, yes, sir. They raise their hands. They look nice. And the teacher starts creating a distorted narrative about whether or not they know what's going on in the classroom. They start looking at the boys in the back of the class and saying, damn, I wish y'all would act like they do. You see how they're sitting there so quiet and learning? That the education system, without an acceptance of the rhythm of urbanness, starts creating divisiveness within the classroom. And most importantly is understanding that when that divisiveness plays out, it plays out in a scenario like this. And I know that lasted 30 seconds so you wouldn't catch it. So I'm going to play this slowly. If I play this slowly, you can think about the fact that the teacher was asking a question. The students were responding or thinking about said question or not. He was still talking. And the very second that that teacher stopped talking, you see those hands go up? Let me bring that back for you. I'll do some hip-hopness. I'll scratch it. All right. So those hands go up in unison. Those hands went up in unison at the very second where the teacher asked that question. Now, some will go into the teaching and learning experience and say, well, that means that they're engaged, right? But in reality, what has happened is the non-acceptance of the rhythm of the urban experience had created a situation that was inflicted on the psyche of those young ladies, that they created a space for themselves where they had to acquiesce to the structure of the school. And acquiescing to the structure of the schools means raising hands when they want me to raise hands. And in reality, you cannot even process a question as quickly as they raise their hand. Where the absence of rhythm creates a space where physically it looks like they're engaged, when in actuality they're very divorced from the experience. In fact, we went even further than this. And we said, well, let's look at these young ladies' test grades in this science class. And we realized that they scored higher than the boys. We're like, man, this is crazy. They scored higher than the boys. So we actually looked at the tests. And the content expertise of the boys and the content expertise of the girls were the exact same, but they scored higher. I don't think y'all feel me on this. The answers to the tests that they provided were the exact same, but the young ladies scored higher. Meaning then that in the educational space where the rhythm of urban education or the rhythm of urbanness is not welcomed, a lot of these young ladies in the classroom acquiesce to the whims of the teacher, oftentimes the male teacher. Think about that. That's heavy, right? We talk about, I don't think y'all feel me. Like, we talk about the experiences of black women in America and the idea that they have to acquiesce to the whims of men in America, where in the classroom, without the acceptance of the rhythm of urbanness, these young ladies have to acquiesce to the whims and needs of the science teacher, who are oftentimes male science teachers. And that characteristics, which is exactly what you want me to do, meaning raise my hand whenever you want me to raise my hand. Be nice and pretty so I can get higher grades. But you're not at all assessing me for my content knowledge or my expertise. Because the structures in place don't focus on the rhythm of urban education. On the flip side of this, we have these type of scenarios.
What is the total number of nucleons? What is the total number of nucleons? 25. You should try to number 34. Yeah, I jumped. Because they're all related. They're all related. It's easy to understand. They're all related. We're talking about don't you got number 25? I'm fine. Subtract 79 for the number of nucleons. It's 45. Subtract 45. Yeah, 45. Nucleons. How many nucleons? It looks like we have some confusion on what is a nucleus.
The absence of the focus on the rhythm of the urban experience either creates a population that becomes docile and not focused on learning content, or one that attempts to engage consistently 7 or 8 times. But the rhythm of his mode of interaction doesn't matter. It doesn't match. It doesn't coincide with the rhythm of the structure of the classroom, and therefore, that happens at the end. Now, let's stop for a second and bring back the lens that we're coming through all of this with, which is the idea of health and wellness. What happens to the psyche, the self-construction, the seeing self as academic, when you go into a space where that becomes the outcome of your attempts to engage, because your rhythm doesn't match the rhythm of the classroom? When we have conversations about disinterest in education of young black men of color, we don't see the precursor. We focus on the outcome. Well, the precursor is the mismatch of the rhythm. So I initially talked about this idea of rhythm. Now I want to transition into the idea of the lost blues. Lost blues. Scientists or color scientists, they have identified the color indigo. They know the color indigo exists, but they haven't accepted quite under the auspice, under the parameters of color science that it's an actual color. It's like 420 to 450 nanometers in measure, and anything less than that is not an actual color. So we know indigo exists, but they don't really focus on indigo as being a culture. Ride with me. I'm going to land in a second. And when we think about blues, you think about this idea of rhythm and blues, our culture. And then we want to focus on this idea of what I call indigo children. Now, this notion of indigo children was developed in the 80s, and it was perceived as a pseudoscientific approach of classifying certain populations who wouldn't fit within the regular structures of schooling and education. They would say, kids who are deeply sensitive, very hyperreactive, couldn't really take order well, they were classified as indigo children. And folks were saying that, when we look at these indigo children, I see an aura around them, and the aura of them was this color of indigo. And this notion of indigo children has been used by folks to classify youth in regular educational settings that exhibit behaviors that don't quite fit into the norm. Let me take this a little step further. So if you go to areas where you have populations who are socioeconomically advantaged, and their children can't sit quietly, can't pay attention, this idea of indigo children was used as a way through which you can describe away a kid who wasn't acting right. And it developed really quickly into this worldwide phenomenon. It was on ABC News, and on ABC News they had this, Diane Sawyer was interviewing this lady about her indigo children, and she talked about the spirituality of her children, and the camera was zoom in at one point and zoomed in on the blue eyes of the kids, and said, yes, you see their blue eyes and their deep insight. You should YouTube it. It's fascinating to watch. And this is what makes them indigo children. I would argue that the true indigo children are black and brown youth in urban settings. Well, while I do not agree with the notion of looking at people to see their blue aura, and some may or may not, the scientists in me won't allow me to, I do understand that there are populations who, when they go into certain spaces, the self that they exhibit doesn't quite fit. The true indigo children are our children. They are hip-hop children. And I want to expand this metaphor of indigo children a bit to sort of include also the fact that when you are an indigo child, it's really for us, what is indigo? It's a deep shade of blue that's also bright. I remember back in the days when I was in school, the most beautiful sisters will always get teased because they like, she's so dark-skinned, she blue, right? I know y'all heard it before, right? And this reminds me of Pac, like a darker the berry, the sweeter the juice, right? But the idea there is that this notion of indigo, if you even just talk about phenotypically, aligns more to black and brown youth of color, but also in the attributes of indigo children, not being able to fit within conventional settings or being in this sort of hypersensitivity we find in hip-hop. And those three images, I would argue, are what happens or what has happened to some of our indigo children, the brightest who can't fit into regular structures. That first young man is called Capital Steez. Capital Steez is from a rap group called Pro Era. Pro Era is the group that has now launched the career of Joey Badass, who's a brilliant young MC. Capital Steez committed suicide about 3 months ago. The second young man, his name is Freddie E. Freddie E was a rapper that's associated with Tyga and also with Young Money. And he committed suicide less than 3 months ago. The last young man was a hip-hop icon. He ushered in the careers of everybody from Busta Rhymes to 50 Cent. His name was Chris Lighty. In the last year, Chris Lighty committed suicide. Arab is telling you about how he feels about his life. These young men did the same. We didn't pay attention. And this was the outcome. Do you know about the increasing rates of black male suicide in urban areas have almost quadrupled in the last decade? And I make the argument that, of course, that's a health issue. But we have to look at the spaces who house these young men for a majority of their lives. Where do they spend the most time? Where are they every day other than the street corner? They're in the school. They're in a school where their culture and the rhythm of their experience is not accepted. And when you're dealing with a culture of young people like hip-hop that is organically created and rooted in their communities, and hip-hop has been commercialized and capitalized on by corporations, where only certain versions of hip-hop become pronounced to the public, what happens is what hip-hop provided can no longer be provided. Let me say that again. What hip-hop provided in its inception can no longer be provided with the corporate rape of the culture. Hip-hop is rooted in 5 elements: rapping, DJing, b-boying, graffiti. Those are 4, right? But guess what the 5th one is? Knowledge of self. Meaning those who, and I would argue there's a hip-hop theoretical framework that exists by Afrika Bambaataa, crafted by him brilliantly, but we got to cite everybody else. I wish people would start citing Bambaataa instead. But what I'm saying is that hip-hop actually has in its elements a piece of it that talks about a knowledge of self and psyche and wellness. But with the corporate takeover of the culture, that element has been removed from the culture. And so with the removal of that element from the culture, the corporate versions of it do not provide the outlet for speech and visibility and rhythm. And the result of the absence of a knowledge of self is a phenomenon that we're having with capital C's, Freddie E, and Chris Light. So now we talked about the rhythm. We talked about the lost blues. Let's talk a bit about health. Let's talk about Pac. These are a bunch of lyrics that actually just came out of some Tupac lyrics. One even got lost. Tried to help me, the marijuana had my mind going, it wasn't healthy. I travel places, caught cases. Somebody help me, I drink a 5th of Hennessy, I don't think it's healthy. Don't think it's healthy. I see my enemies, they creeping. That Jack and the Robin despising your homie ain't healthy, wasn't healthy. I travel places, caught cases. So many thoughts in my mind, it ain't healthy. I'm not healthy, I'm asking you God to help me. This is one artist. If I went through the lexicon of Joe Budden's lyrics, a brilliant but yet emotionally unstable young man, I would find the same exact themes. Cries out for help, through the music, unidentified. But what's most powerful about these cries out for help is also there are pathways towards how we can find solutions to address these health issues. He's talking specifically about the effects of marijuana, the effects of alcohol, the effects of enemies creeping, and the self-consciousness. There's this effect of Jack and Robin. So not only are they describing the fact that these are health issues that are affecting their psyche, they're also giving us avenues through which we can address these issues if we listen. More broadly, some school rap quotes. And I want you to look in and think about these quotes again through what it means to the wellness of an individual. The first song on the first album of the Notorious B.I.G., his first dedication on his first album was to dedicate his album to all the teachers who told me I wouldn't amount to nothing. He dedicated the album to the police who told me he wouldn't amount to nothing, and the second reference was to all the people who call the police on me when I have enough money to feed my daughter. But the conversation about the teachers came first. Kanye West, back to school, and I hate it there. Anything I want, you have to wait a year. This kid graduated at the top of the class and went for cheesecake. He was a motherfucking waiter there, right? Jay-Z, proud new owner of the Nets, no diploma, no regrets. Because I'm glad I got the heck up out of there to become self-actualized. Kanye West, we ain't retards the way teachers thought. Hold up, hold fast. We make more cash. Now tell my mama I belong in that slow class. Jim Jones, I'm a product of the PJEX. My teacher always told me I grew up to be a reject. This is the voice of the generation telling you what is impacting their health and their well-being. Beyond the mismatch of the rhythm is a focus on their words. And so finally, you know, as I kind of wind this down a little bit, because if you kept me on here all day, because I want to actually talk to you guys, I'll be here all damn day. I want to talk about how this idea about the mismatch of rhythm, this loss of the blues, also matches really brilliantly with what we are finding in the most recent neuroscientific research about the brains of youth who are involved in hip-hop culture. There was a recent study done with fMRI research that talked about what happens when rappers were engaged in the art of the freestyle. And the art of the freestyle is that beautiful syncopation that is hip-hop. It's our rhythm. Well, when rappers were engaged in this freestyle, they attached fMRIs to these guys while they were rapping. They found that the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is linked to motivation, organization, activity, were sparked when engaged in the process of hip-hop. At the same time, they found that the dorsolateral region, which controls like behavior, self-control, self-monitoring, self-censoring, that part had a decrease in activity when they were engaging in processes that mimicked traditional schooling, i.e. rote memorization. So let's play this out. Let's take it a step further. So therefore, it means that if I go into a school and the rhythm of my experience does not match with the rhythm of the school, but yet I'm forced to ingest in information, the parts of my brain that control self-control are almost deactivated, which is why I wild out. So when we talk about poor behavior in schools, or kids who need to be on Ritalin, I mean, we haven't even talked yet about the oversaturation of the medication of our black and brown youth in schools, right? But the kids who are actually asked to be on drugs to modify their behavior and their health in schools are actually neuroscientifically wired to not engage given the structure of the traditional school. That the processes that we want to be activated in school, which focus on motivation, organization, being active, thinking actively, those things occur in the rhythm of their experiences outside of the school space. Now, if you go to any educator, they will say, I want kids to be active. I want them to be motivated. I want them to be organized. I want them to be more motivated in the classroom. But you cannot have a kid motivated in the classroom if the structure of the classroom neuroscientifically is not wired to help them to truly engage. And when the tool for them to be truly engaged occurs in spaces outside of the classroom. Logically, it makes no sense. Neuroscientifically, it makes no sense. We have to get to a point where the rhythm of our experience matches the rhythm of the experiences of our youth. I will close with science. I keep saying I'm going to close, right? Because I really want to talk to you guys. So I want to open up a space for discussion. But I will close with just saying I come to this from the lens of a science educator, a scientist by training. And the most fascinating thing that I've discovered in my recent research is, what are the attributes, what are the traits, what are the skills, what are the dispositions, what are the things that made the most prolific and brilliant scientists of our time? And what I found in my research is that they exhibited curiosity, skepticism, observation, creativity, reasoning, anti-authoritarian thinking. And I looked across the globe for a distinct population of people who exhibited these same characteristics, and the only place I could find it was in hip-hop. And the reason why we're launching CHEUSE is because of this. It's because it is the space, like the discipline where the dispositions of our young people who have been marginalized from success and pushed out of healthy spaces, the discipline where they are most aligned is actually the sciences. Despite the fact that the sciences are the disciplines where they're least successful. That all the skills of the most brilliant scientists of our time we find in MCs. When a rapper can make up rhymes off the cuff and weave together brilliant words and use metaphors and analogy in a seamless fashion with this distinct rhythm and meter and rhyme, those skills that develop innovation are found in scientists but also found in our young people. And what we want to do through this center is to reawaken those possibilities. To get to a point where we can change the rhythm of the classroom to match the experiences of young people. And we know that science is a way to do it because, one, science is a discipline that gives some insight into the discourse of power. Let's not get that twisted. But second of all, it's the skills that they inherently have. If a young person is able to critically analyze conditions in their environment if they're anti-authoritarian about diabetes clusters in the community and they're thinking with curiosity about why is it there's extreme pollution in our community, they're developing scientific skills, but at the same time, they're addressing the health concerns that impact them in their lives. So as we move forward, Dr. Wallace and I are asking you to do a few things. To choose health, to choose education, to choose transforming our practice to soak in the information that the youth bring to us, to choose new possibilities. Thank you. I think we got a couple minutes for questions, and we have mics on either side. So feel free to just, if you have thoughts, questions, feedback, remarks, please feel free to come up to any one of the mics. And we have exactly 15 minutes for questions. So I know I hit you with a lot, so I'll let you come through, calm down. My energy is high, right? Not quite. We have 15 minutes till afternoon.
But I don't really, yeah, there Perfect. It is. Well, I just want to say thank you for your presentation. I mean, it was really, I absorbed a lot of it as a mother of a 13-year-old boy, middle school, in the 8th grade, who, on one hand, it seems like he loves school, but at other times, it's like, I hate that place. Your words and your thoughts, I was really soaking it in. So my question is, when you talk about the rhythm of the environment, do you have any specific, in terms of idea, what do you really mean? Can you clarify that? Is that the physical space of the class? Tell me what you would, take that to the next level in terms of what do you mean? Because, I know even for my son, who is like, with your last, the section that you talked about the brain and the second area that talks about self-monitoring, that was a phrase that the teacher at parent-teacher conference used to me. So it really it just gets me thinking, like, what exactly do you mean? And what would that mean for, other 13-year-old boys who may be in that class, and like my son, who feels like, I just can't stand that class.
I had a young man tell me once, I hate that place. It hurts my spirit. When I talk about the rhythm, and that's why I try to make the analogy earlier, sort of jovially when I showed the boom bap, and the boom bap is actually hip hop, the breakbeat, the rhythm. But I also showed, Sherman Humsley with a George Jefferson strut. Is that when we talk about the rhythm of the experience, it talks about not only the physical arenas of the classroom, but also the social and the emotional spaces in the classroom to allow youth selves to be in classroom. I'll just run off a couple of things. One, I've never understood why in New York City public schools it's a rule where you have to take off your fitted cap to get into the classroom. Right? I've seen so many suspensions happen because a kid just refused to take off his fitted. And that is a piece of the youth self that we don't know anything about. But if you delve deeply into it, my 3-year-old hat with a sticker still on it means something to me. It's like my crown. Like, this is what makes me who I am in this space. And so for you to come up and take my hat off my head, then I am going to confront you. And we're going to go at loggerheads, and we're going to fight. And at the end of that fight, I'm not going to learn from you. And at the end of that, nobody gets their goals met. And I'm not saying you don't work with young men to understand what's appropriate decorum in different spaces. I'm saying that if a kid walks to my classroom and decided he wanted to put his fitted hat on, then I'll just let that rock. When I say rhythm in the classroom, I talk about the boom and the bap. When you have kids who are from urban areas who, I remember the first time I went away to grad school, it was silent. I went from the Bronx to Troy, New York. I couldn't sleep for like a week because it was too quiet, right? It's the fact that it makes no sense to have a drop everything and read silently program in a classroom if in every experience the youth have, they've learned to move to the rhythm of the city. There's trains passing by, cars passing by, people are yelling at you outside of the window, and I learned to function in that space. For me to sit in the classroom and be completely, absolutely silent, it's uncomfortable. So, all right, lay back, sit back, throw your music on 3, and have that music permeate the space of the classroom. Have that rap instrumental boom bap play there in the background, right? I'm also talking about teachers being able to investigate the social spaces where youth inhabit, to understand what phenomena guide their experiences. That, I got kicked out of conference for this once where I said, they were doing a teacher recruitment thing, and they were paying all this money for these teachers to go and work in these urban settings. But all the teachers who would go to work in the settings would leave that school and then drive miles away to go live out in the burbs. So they drive in every day. They be this caring teacher, and then they get back in their car and they drive back. And I was like, well, what if we spent the same amount of money that we're spending on paying their tuition to give them a stipend to live in the community where they taught? How novel. And right? And they were like, no. But I'm talking, when you talk about the rhythm of the experience, the only way you fully experience the rhythm is by being in that space. And so I'm arguing for that kind of work also, that teacher preparation includes not just tours of the community, but embeddedness in the community. It involves spaces where you have kids come up and take the helm of the conversation, where teachers take notes on how the students teach so they can modify their practice to better match the rhythm of their experiences. So I'm talking about the physical structures of the classroom, but I'm also talking about teacher preparation. I'm talking about music and hip-hop in the classroom as not only the background noise, but also the tool through which we teach. It's nuanced. Oh, by the way, just for the record, if you want to know more about that, my book, Urban Science Education for the Hip-Hop Generation, Amazon.com, buy that, cop that, talks about the rhythm of the classroom. Yeah, and you're going to fight them for it, because that's not the way that you engage in it. But if you got good results, why fight it? Yes.
The excellent and highly sophisticated questions that students are asking are ignored or shut down by teachers who are afraid they don't have the answer.
I have the same concerns. And I think, part of what we want to do here is to really merge the work of those who are teachers in practice and pedagogues and those who are in spaces that are dealing with young people in clinics and areas of that sense also, to understand that what happens in those classroom spaces has direct implications on their health and their wellness. I think, that piece of the work has not been teased out yet. So it is a concern for me, and it's a concern pedagogically. But more importantly is, what are the collateral effects of that silencing in classrooms on how youth construct self and what kind of lifestyles they have?
Right, but is it a way in for us? I had a student who was struggling to get through her science requirement in high school so she could graduate. Mm-hmm. And she says, her question is, why do some people die of cancer and some people don't? And it's like, okay, the NIH is working on that. It's so big, it's so profound, and it's so immediately of her experience,
But it's not that big. So but it's big and it's profound. But one of the things, and this is part of the work that we're going to be doing, is identifying science curriculum that allows youth to ask those broad questions, but still allows them to meet those benchmarks that are required for school. There's no reason why a student can't be intrigued about cancer and why do people die of cancer, and utilize that as the anchor to find out about cell replication and cutting-edge avenues for research. And that becomes the pathway through which they get the required benchmarks while engaging in a project that addresses the health concerns of the community. So it's actually not as far off as it is. It's a big question, but the thing about big questions is you have to have small pathways to address them. So I think when a kid asks that question, you don't say, oh my gosh, leave it to the NIH.
Or I can't answer that.
No,
that's what an educator told me. I can't answer that, so we have a problem here.
Well, that person
it's not about you answering it. This child can answer their own question, and they will never forget what they find out.
And that person is misguided.
What can you do to guide them?
At best misguided, at worst stupid. But you just don't do that as a teacher, just even generally. You just can't do that. Thanks for that question, though. Go here instead, I guess. We'll go back and forth.
I'm here as a dance educator, and I also do a lot of advocacy for kids with special needs going in, and particularly seem to be, feel like...
Nah, just keep it here.
working with teenage boys going into schools. And so I really appreciate all that you're bringing in. I have a different story that also has to do with my own daughter, who's someone who uses rhythm to learn math, too, right? It just helps her with her learning. And last year, her school really allowed for a lot of influx of hip-hop in the dance performance. And then something went down and they stopped. And I just saw the whole culture of the school just die for those kids who, in this case, are the minority, just have their rhythm excluded within the school. So I just want to speak to that happening at all levels of our corporate structure and our schools, both the private schools, the public schools. It's all interfaced.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
I have a second thing which has to do with rhythm. As a movement analyst, we can look at rhythm in terms of just body language and really get down to that level. I know you know this, but I feel like teachers can tune in more to body language and to the body itself and the rhythm specifically of movement. So as a dance educator, we can look to our other dance educators and even some of our physical educators to sensitize to that as well. So I don't have a question, I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I hope that more of us can collaborate.
Thank you. Amazing insight. Thank you. You know, really, just a quick response to that also is it's really important for us to recognize that the welcoming or the addressing or the incorporation of hip-hop into existing practice, whether in health spaces or in educational spaces, is not only beneficial to urban youth of color whose rhythms are not aligned to that of the classroom. I always make the argument that, listen, in a hip-hop world and globe, when the United States is using hip-hop as a tool through which they in other countries as a tool through which they pacify other audiences and a way to sort of engage with different populations, then if you go through schools and you lack a hip-hop sensibility and you're not from hip-hop, you lose as well.
Yeah.
You know, so it's something where it's a way of knowing and being that benefits all populations, and it's about time where a way of knowing being that meets the needs of a distinct population who's been pushed out can also be brought in, and those who are ignorant of the culture can learn about it as well. Everybody becomes developed from it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was amazing, obviously.
Thank you.
I traveled from Hartford this morning to be here to hear you, and I'm so very glad that I came.
Thank you.
And so very glad to be a part of this. Quick comment and then just a question. I'm a parent of 3 young men of many colors and hues, and one of them, I think by first grade, was told he was autistic, had Asperger's, PPD, NOS. He was in occupational therapy and speech therapy, and by the end of second grade and about 7 or 8 IEPs, I took him out of school. I took him out of school until he chose the school that he wanted to go to, and I just want to say this to every parent. It is our responsibility to empower our sons and daughters, and the educational system is designed to socialize more than it is to educate and empower. That's just the reality of social constructs and the way that educational systems are designed. And so you have that, we have that responsibility. And so I gave my son Diop and Sodoma and everybody else that he gravitated toward when we went to the library, and he's a scientist. And so this is my question with regard to race to the top and race everywhere else and achieve this and no one's going to be left behind, and all sorts of quantitative data that we're now looking for. The educational system is not designed to deconstruct and really embrace what you're talking about. So are you an advocate for public school education? What is the response or the comment that you give to parents and individuals when they lose hope in the system?
I'm a firm believer in the transformation of any social sphere that doesn't meet the needs of the population that it should. This work is not just like academic work. To engage in this type of work, you have to be a revolutionary. I mean, part of what the charge is that we're laying out to you is not just soak in the speech that Chris Emdin says and be like, man, we should look at those kids differently. I mean, the last piece of the slide, which I cut short so that we can have some time for questioning, is what must happen then is that there's a teaching and learning for social political action. That if we understand and we agree that this is a phenomenon that exists and is not meeting the needs of our youth, whether in education or in health, then we have to create a consortium of people to buck against the system. If it's indeed a public school, then it's your school. And so you can advocate for the brand of education that's necessary in your school. And there are schools right now that, there are school districts right now that are saying, no, we're not going to take, we're not going to just take that test anymore. Unfortunately, what's intriguing is that those schools who are able to have the agency to make those decisions are often those who are more socioeconomically advantaged. And so, socioeconomically disadvantaged populations are been conditioned to not feel like they have the voice to be able to push back. And part of our work is to push back, to teach for social political action, to create connections with folks who are like-minded, and to reframe not just public education, but all education. I think you just have to find allies. Yeah.
Hi.
We have this reputation for being the best on-time conference. And what's really fortunate is that we've dedicated 55 minutes tomorrow morning just to a community discussion on hip-hop and health. So write your questions down or make up a rap about them, just so you remember, so that we can capture the spirit of this conversation. So I apologize for having to ask you to bring that question tomorrow morning.
Not even time for one more, huh?
No. No, because you see that gentleman there in the blue shirt? That's Professor Bash. He is a national expert on school health, and he's going to start. He needs his whole 55 minutes, too. And that's going to be at 1:45. And you need to have that time to go to a restaurant, have them serve you, or go to our cafeteria.
Just hit me up on Twitter. If you use the CHEUSE hashtag,
that's right.
Ask the question, I'll respond to it. You can follow me at Chris Emdin, ChrisEmdin, and I will directly respond to whatever question it is that you have. Yeah.
Okay, so there's just one more thing. First of all, if you order a plaque and they give you the wrong size, you just have to forgive them, right? Else you can get high blood pressure. As part of the celebration of the 5th Annual Health Disparities Conference at Teachers College and the official launch of the Center for Health Equity in Urban Science Education, Christopher Emdin, Ph.D., is honored for outstanding early career achievements as a regional, national, and global leader in advancing hip-hop as culture and solution for the academic achievement of youth and pipeline for careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, as well as healthcare service delivery. We're honored to present this award to you.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Take a picture. Take a picture. Yeah, you're gonna take a picture.
If there's any career, if anybody you want to follow over the coming decades, it's this gentleman. So please come to the forum tomorrow morning.